Hi, Jake. Hey, Jay. Am I officially live? The stream I'm looking at's not doing any updating here. Am I dropping any frames or anything? It doesn't look like it. Everything's looking good here. Hi, guys. Can you hear me okay? So you may be wondering why there's a giant black box there, and that's because I've got the eyesight hooked up, but I don't have it on right now. So we're going to be showing you how I have this hooked up right now. Hi, Garrett. How you doing? I thought I'm not tired enough to go to sleep yet, so why not stay up a bit longer, have a late Sunday night stream here. Awesome. I'm good. That's good to hear. I have this thing set up on low latency, but I actually don't think it's that low of a latency here. So we're going to see how this goes. It seems to be running fine now. No issues whatsoever. I'm on the 2014 Mini, and honestly, this is smoother than it is in Windows for sure. So we may be streaming on this in the future. How are you guys doing tonight? I know this is a very unexpected stream here, and my stream is buffering. I guess it caught up. I wonder how badly this thing is lagging right now. Encoding overloaded, considering turning down video settings. Yeah, I don't think so. It seems to be doing fine. We are streaming at 1080p right now on a 2014 Mini. And this is the max spec one, so it's 2 cores, 4 threads at 3 gigahertz. So it might be able to handle it. We'll see. I want to see how big the load is on this right now. Activity monitor. Leonidas says it looks fine. Awesome. CPU history. Have that down here. It's looking pretty good. Temperature's a little warm. It's going to need to be repasted for sure. But this system's actually in pretty fair shape. So anyway, streaming on a Mac Mini equals no, just don't. Yeah. Well, anyway, guys, black box up in the top of the corner here. I'm going to move OBS over to the top so I can see what I'm doing. I want to show you the setup I have right now. Okay, so here is the setup right here. We are running Sierra right now because that's what this Mini came with. If we go up to about this Mac, those are the specs right there. I can't see them. There we go. Those are the specs right there, as we can see. 3 gigahertz Core i7. That's the dual core with the 4 threads. 16 gigs of DDR3. It's, of course, soldered onto the board. It can't go any higher or lower. And it's actually got a lot of work going on the CPU here. But if you look here, it's only using 50% right now, which isn't too bad. And yeah. So I also wanted to show you what the setup looks like. Yeah, it is better than the 2010 for sure, Jay. Here's the setup right now. I have it sitting under the monitor. Power cable, Ethernet. I'm not on Wi-Fi. This is a mini display port to HDMI because I didn't have an HDMI cable down here, but for some odd reason my dad had a mini display port cable. So I have the mini display port here, and it's plugged into HDMI on the monitor. Then I've got Thunderbolt FireWire, so we can see what I'm seeing with the eyesight right here. And also we have the mouse, keyboard, and 1080p webcam. So, yeah. Wow, that 2014 is sure better than the Rode Apple with 4 gigs of RAM and a 1.4. Yeah, that thing's a pile of crap. No one should ever buy that. It's not ever going to be a good deal. Unless you get it for free, then it's still, it'd make a better doorstop, honestly. The maxed out one, when they were selling these new, this thing's spec'd out to what it has, not counting the SSD, because I didn't spec it out with the SSD. I looked it up. Just this setup right here, this thing was $1,400 brand new, and I got it for $500. And a year and a half ago, it was $1,400. So that is a big difference. These things have dropped through the floor in value. And as we see here, it's streaming everything totally fine. Everything's looking pretty good. It still doesn't have the horsepower of the 2012 with the 4 cores and 8 threads, but it's holding its own, and this is outdoing what 2011s can do. Although I want to try to stream off of 2011, because then that would give me a purpose for the other 2011 I have. So anyway, is that the newest Mac you own? Yes, indeed, Garrett. This is the newest Mac I own, and I wouldn't have bought it unless it was under $500, and it was under $500, $5. It's a pretty good. It's not that bad of a system, honestly. Other than the fact that the RAM soldered on, which sucks. It really sucks having the RAM soldered on. But we're going to turn this off here. And I'm going to get that out the way. Remove. Here we go. So yeah, it has not dropped one frame yet. I've had this thing running on the stream before I even went live. It's been running for 9 minutes. And it's staying at 50% CPU usage. This isn't bad at all. And we're streaming at 1080p. YouTube's complaining that the bit rate's lower than the recommended, but that's because I lowered the bit rate a lot to make sure everything came through easier for the Mac Mini. I could probably up it, but there's no lag, as I can tell, and there's no drop frame, so we'll see what happens. I have the 2018 Mini with the 3 GHz 6-core i5, 32 gigs of RAM, 256 gig SSD, and I just ordered a Radeon RX 500 and a Sonnet E GPU box for it. Neat. I did too. Well, I didn't order the 2018 Mini. This is going to be the newest Mini I have for a while, but I have it down here, and I can't set this keyboard away. I'll be right back. I want to show you guys this. All right. Ugh. Okay. This thing's heavier than it looks. So why am I holding right here, guys? This is the cheapest RX 580 I could find on eBay. They didn't look all scammy. And this actually came, the seller said that they lived in Ohio. They didn't live in Ohio. This actually shipped out less than a mile away from my old house. I could have literally went over and picked it up if I still lived at my old house. This is the cheapest RX 580 that was on eBay. And it's going into one of these minis. I want to experiment with all 3 Thunderbolt 1 and 2 minis. So the 2011 and 2012s had Thunderbolt 1, and the 2014 has Thunderbolt 2. We're going to be using the Thunderbolt 3 eGPU box here. This is the Razer Core 3, I think. This is the cheapest Razer Core that was available on eBay also. And I have no clue how it works or how it opens. Oh, there's a handle right here. That's convenient. And let's open it up on camera and see how this works. This should be fun. I don't know if this thing's ever been used, honestly. It definitely dumps some stuff in here. That's interesting. Oh, this is yeah, this has been used before because this is an HDMI port cover for a video card, which this thing didn't come with a video card. Hi, Matt. Okay, so this is the Razer core here, which I can't test yet because I have every single converter and adapter except for the Thunderbolt 2 cable. So yeah, this has been used before. There's some glue here from this tape being redone. But the seller kept all the original packaging. And honestly, I could probably do this on camera. I don't know, let's see. I'll have to hold it like this, and I'll have to also move OBS so I can see what I'm doing. Okay, so we have to remove this, put that in the house, slot blank, can't see what I'm doing. Put the screw back in. Maybe? Oh, the bracket on this thing's bent. That would explain it. Okay, let's pull this back out. There. Now let's put it back in. Yeah, and now it lines up properly. So it's in there, and we drop the screw back in, and it goes in crooked because this bracket's still bent. This is fun. Still 0 drop frames. It's not bad. We'll just go with it. Pull the covers off here. And we'll plug in the card, which is an 8-pin, which luckily we have an 8-pin right here. So it goes in here, like so. There we go. We have the Razer core completely set up here. It really doesn't look like this thing was used a whole lot, if at all. And that's what it looks like. And then you would think there's actually some kind of screw to keep this from falling out, but I don't see anything that prevents it from falling out. Oh, I guess the handle locks around a post. So, yeah, this is the heavy part. The case itself is really, really freaking heavy. But we just slide it in here. It might have been dropped a little bit. It's a little warped back here. But I think it's going to work. I have no way to test it right now. But here we go. There is my RX 580 eGPU, and it will be ready to go in this Mini, the 2012 Mini, and the 2011 Mini. The 2011 Mini is going to be the interesting one because I don't know how that's going to work out. Yeah, I might do it on another stream. We'll see. But we're not doing that today because, first off, I don't have the cable. Do you think the 2011 will work for live streaming? I don't know. The 2011 Mini is kind of... The one I bought was the base model 2011 Mini, which is still more powerful than the base model 2014. But I bought the base models because they're the ones with the 100% GPU support for the patcher. The other two models didn't have, they had dedicated graphics instead of integrated graphics, and the dedicated graphics just they're not supported in the patcher at all, so it would run like crap. Yeah, it is kind of like a cube, really. But it is an i5, but since it's an i5, I can't remember if it's got hyper-threading or not. I'd have to look it up. It's 2.3 i5 2011, so it's either 2 threads, 2 cores, 2 threads, or it's 2 cores, 4 threads, but I'm not 100% sure which. I think it might have more threads. It might be hyper-threaded. So it might stream fine. So yeah, it has hyper-threading. Okay, so it's 2 cores, 4 threads. It might be able to keep up because this thing's 2 cores, 4 threads. It just has more cache and it runs faster. So we could see. But what I want to do with this is test it on every Thunderbolt Mac I have, which Colin still got my 2012 MacBook Pro, which he fried. Long story on that. He couldn't get the CPU to stick. So he's trying to put a better logic port in, but he's got to fix that first. But that is the only Thunderbolt Mac Mini I have that I don't have a way to test right now. I mean, Mac in general, that I don't have a way to test because he still has it. But let's set this to the side here. Set it on top of my G5. Okay, so I want to run this eGPU on every Thunderbolt Mac I have and test it out to see how it works. The problem is with the 2011s, I will have to set up Mojave probably without the legacy GPU patch, which means without the graphics acceleration, without the eGPU, it's going to run like crap. And Colin has no clue if it will actually even work. So, we're going to have to find out. I can't remember if High Sierra supports eGPU or not. If it does, we'll have to probably test it in High Sierra if Mojave doesn't work. But Mojave definitely supports it. Catalina supports it. So we're going to try it and see what happens. But it will work with the 2012 and the 2014. You just have to patch it to make it work, which we will do. It's pretty easy. You disable SIP, then you type in a string of code, which go in terminal, which downloads a package which patches the whole system to make it a supported eGPU Mac. So it shouldn't be too hard to do, and that patch works in Mojave and Catalina, so that would be neat. Apple has locked AMD GPUs ROMs in Windows, so no ROM dumping unless someone can get around it. Someone can get around it. The only thing you gotta really do is probably take the ROM off the board. It's a problem, but you could probably do it. Let's see here. It actually runs Catalina pretty well. No translucence, and there's... Oh yeah, Leonidas. 2011 had Thunderbolt. It was the first Mac Mini with Thunderbolt. It has Thunderbolt 1. So we're going to see how that works. But if you're using it with the other ones, unsupported GPU, it's got to be rough. But you say it runs pretty well, so I'm glad it's working for you. Dysfunctional Wombat says, my 2010 Mac Mini has been handling Mojave rather nicely. I did get Snow Leopard installed and an SSD. It flies ridiculously fast. It boots before the loading wheel comes up. Yeah, mine does too. My 2010 that I tried to stream with earlier, it's got Mojave on it, it's got Catalina on it, it's got High Sierra on it, and it's got Snow Leopard on it. And it will boot up Snow Leopard extremely quick, but I'm going to have to reinstall it because I did a copy of it off of my MacBook Pro, and I don't think it copied very well. So I'm going to do it from scratch because I can't get some of the apps to open up in it. They just keep crashing. So we'll see. Matt says eGPUs are supported by any Thunderbolt 3 equipped Mac with High Sierra or later. Awesome. So yeah, the 2011 will run it in High Sierra, probably with the patcher, if the patcher supports High Sierra. I don't know if it does or not, but I know it supports Mojave and Catalina. Yeah, 2011 was Intel Sandy Bridge. It was the first chip to have Thunderbolt. Yep. I even want to try this on my 2011 iMac, which with the NVIDIA card, it's going to be weird. I don't know if it's going to work or not because Mojave hates, and I'll put exclamation point on this, hates mixing NVIDIA and AMD cards. Hates it so badly. You can't get. You'll either get one or the other to run. It won't run them side by side. It's got to be either AMD and AMD or NVIDIA and NVIDIA. And of course, the NVIDIAs are up to Kepler, and only Kepler. So I've got an NVIDIA card in that iMac, so it's going to be a problem probably. How high is this thing getting? Still not bad, and it's still at 50% CPU load. That's not bad. Mr. H is also running a 2011 iMac. That's the reason for the wonkiness is because the GPU is not supported. You need to switch to a metal supported or downgrade to a 4000 series iMac card from a late 2009 or the very base model mid 2010 model. And then you can get the acceleration to work with the patcher. Dysfunctional wombat, that does sound nightmarish, and I just dropped something. I don't know where it went. Darn it. Oh well. But yeah, what I did to get Snow Leopard to run on my Macs that supported Snow Leopard or unofficially supported Snow Leopard, like I've got one of my mid 2011 minis running Snow Leopard. What you have to do is you have to have a supported Mac that supports Snow Leopard, and then you just install with the retail disk, target disk mode, that Mac, and the Mac you want to put the Snow Leopard on, target disk mode, then update while it's still in target disk mode, and then it should boot right up. That's what I did for the Mini. It's also what I did for my 2011 iMac, which was the, I think, last Mac that was released that officially supported Snow Leopard. And then, of course, the late 2011 MacBook Pro and the mid 2011 Mac Mini both support Snow Leopard if you do it the way I just said it, because it uses the early 2011 MacBook Pro drivers, from what I can tell, and it just works. And the late 2011 is literally the same as the early 2011 MacBook Pro. So of course, it will work. The only differences they had was, I think, CPU, and that was it. So, yeah. I did an eGPU back before it was cool. I wanted to back before it was cool, back before it even really supported Mac OS, but I never had the box, which that whole box setup right there still cost a lot more than I wanted to spend. But I might actually get use out of it, so we'll see what happens. If anything, I'll pull the RX 580 out and put it in my 3,1 Pro. It's going to get used one way or another. But yeah, eGPU back before it was cool. That was a fun time for sure. And it worked on some Macs and didn't work on others, especially in Windows. Um, it just some Macs just refused to work with Windows. It was hit or miss. My iMac G4 has a 15-inch. 15-inch has a fan that has is still working even though the G4 is off. That sounds like it might be a grounding issue with the power supply or something. Who knows? There's probably a fix, but you'll have to open it up and make sure there's nothing got in there and chewed something, or if something got too hot and bridged itself. It could be a lot of things. I watched Mac Yak, and boy, the guy sure gave you a hard time for buying those Mac Minis. Yeah, because I spent too much on them. I spent way too much on them. In fact, if you combine the price of all of them, I could have bought a very nicely spec'd out 2018. Not a max spec'd one, but getting close to that for sure. Actually, if you include the eGPU, that was a max spec 2018 Mac Mini. But hey, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 11, 12. Yeah, I got 5 Mac Minis for the price of one, plus an eGPU. Still pretty neat. Running the RX 580 PCIe 4.0 and 2.0 decreases frame rate by 2 or 3 frames in all software that I've tried. That's not bad, Brock. That's actually still pretty impressive. That's the card I'm planning on buying, Jake says. I don't know if I'd actually go with a 5700. The Vegas are still very good. The Vega 56 and 64 still pack a good punch, and they're a lot cheaper than they were, especially on the secondhand market. Matt, to get El Capitan to run on my 2007 Mini, I had to search for 1011X. 10.11.6 doesn't work. Installer app, I found it actually does work, but you have to use the Mac post factor to make it work. That patcher will make it work, the 10.11.6, but of course you still have no GPU support, and you can't, just like with the Mac Pro, you can't upgrade past what is it, 2007-005 security update, because 2018-001 breaks it, because it doesn't support the CPUs. It's interesting how you got that to work, Matt. Very interesting. That's interesting, just a functional wombat about the CDs in Windows XP. Very interesting. You could always use an external optical drive, too. It would probably work. Hi, Steve. How you doing? Do Mac Minis work well for Plex server? Yes, they do. Even the older ones work pretty decently if you have them spec'd out. Um, the sweet spot for price probably right now would be um, if you want to have a more recent Mac Mini. Sweet spot would probably be the base model 5.1 Mini, which is the mid 2011, like the two I bought. That would be the best server for a modern Mini. The 2010 would work pretty decently too, and also the 2009 is not too bad either. Once you get the 1.1, 2.1s, they're pretty rough. Can you tell me which iMac G4s run Classic natively? That's pretty easy. If you want it natively supported, you need a 700 or 800 megahertz G4. The 700 and 800s came in 15-inch, and there was a 17-inch, which was the top of the line one, that came out midway through the run, that has a better GPU in it. So 800 or 700 megahertz 15-inch or 17-inch 800 megahertz is native OS 9 supported. You can run OS 9 hacked on the 1 gigahertz, but it doesn't work right, even though it's the same GPU as the 800. For some reason, the drivers just don't work. I can't get it to work. I've been working on it for over a year now, trying to get it to work. I gave up on it. So the 1 gigahertz and the 1.25, even hacked, they just aren't. The max they'll run is 256 color, which is pretty crappy if you need it for full color. But yeah, the 700 and 800 megahertz G4 iMacs are the top ones there. Testing out Pi-hole. Yeah, it works pretty nicely. Jay, if Jay's still on here, he probably knows a lot about Pi-hole, even though I'm sure he's never set one up. He's got his own firewall. Anyone have any thoughts on the 3.1 with 64 gigs in Catalina? Don't. There is a problem with later OSs on the 3.1, and the most it will support with it running properly is, I think, 52 gigs of RAM. 64, it slows the thing down to a painful crawl. So the max I'd go is probably about 48 gigs of RAM in a 3.1, maybe 32. But if you have the proper amount of RAM in it, Catalina runs pretty nicely on them. The patcher is fully compatible with it. And as long as you have a compatible GPU for Catalina, it should work with no problem. I've been enjoying Front Row on the Snow Leopard with a aluminum Apple remote for use in my Mini. And yeah, well, you can actually get Front Row back on later OSs. I believe you have to. There's a hack for it. In fact, I think it works up to Mojave, and it will work. Some features don't work super great, I don't think, but it still works. I don't remember who makes the patch, but you just Google it, you'll probably find it. Jake says that in 2014 and 13 and 2014, his main desktop was a 1.1 Mini, and main laptop was a 15-inch PowerBook G4. You could have done that back then. You could still technically do it today. It's just slow. Question, just updated my 3,1 Mac Pro using DOS-Dude's Mojave Patcher. It doesn't like my 64 gigs of DDR2, but runs well with 32. That's what I just said. Any idea what I can do? Yes, run 32, like I just said. The later versions, for some reason, it's just not working with it. Like I said, the max you can go, I think, is 52 gigs of RAM. So 48 or 32 is probably your best bet. It's still plenty enough RAM, really, honestly. Unless you're running a lot of RAM disks, I don't ever really see you going past 32 on a 3,1 to begin with. It's still a good amount of RAM. What's your favorite game on Apple Arcade? I don't have one because I don't have Apple Arcade. There. I just never tried it. I'm not very interested in it. I don't really play games on my phone. Although I have games on my phone, I don't play them anymore. I tried Front Row on High Sierra and it crashed, instantly crashed, because unless you patched it properly, it just won't start up. But if you have it patched, it from what I hear, works fine. You're welcome, Tom. Like I said, 32 gigs is still plenty enough, honestly. The only computer I own that has more than 32 gigs is my Mac Pro, and that's only because I wanted triple channel, and I got 48 gigs really, really cheap. So my 4,1, 5,1 flashed ones got 48. All the rest of them have 32 or lower. Even my mid-2011 iMac's got, I think it's 24 gigs in it because I never got around to actually maxing it to 32. What is the max RAM on a 5,1 Mac Pro? Officially, I think it's 96 gigs. The most that support in OS X, I think, is 128. The most that you can get to work, sorta, is like 160. And with a bunch of hacks and stuff for booting up OS X, you can get up to, I think, 256. I think that's the max, but you have to use a different bootloader and stuff. But it will work in Windows. So the max officially is 96, and I wouldn't go past 128. AMD will release new GPUs next week. Vega is dead. I still have a Vega, Brock. I paid good money for that thing, and I'm finally starting to use it. And I had it laying around for almost a year before I got that Mac Pro running properly. I have a Switch and 3DS for taking games with me. I have no need for Apple Arcade either. My Mac Pro 1,1 has 16 gigs of RAM. I want to go up to 32 gigs, but I think I have enough. 16 is still plenty too. And you'd be hard-pressed to go past 16 on hardware that old, honestly. I only went with 32 because I had to replace my whole logic board to get it to work because the RAM controller was broken on my first one. I was stuck at 16 for a while. I tried 8 gig modules and figured out it actually slowed the system down. Because the 1,1, 2,1s, the RAM controller doesn't really like 8 gigs. It will work with 8 gig modules, but it slows it down a lot. It just bottlenecks the hell out of it. So I was using 4 gig modules stuck at 16 gigs. It was working fine with just one card tray in, but I decided to replace the whole logic board. I did a video on it. And my 1,1, well, now 2,1, is still running 32 gigs of RAM next door folding 24/7 with no issues whatsoever. 256 RAM is a lot of money. Yeah, it is, especially in DDR3, because that's a very rare module there. Because DDR3 was probably never really meant to go to the size modules you need for that. So, yeah. Most RAM I've ever had was 12 gigs. Yeah. I'm trying to think. Most of my computers, I think, average 8 gigs. Most of them. For my G5s up, have at least 8 gigs, except for the early Intel Macs that have a max of 3 and 6. But most of them have 8 or higher. I have a Power Mac G5 7,3. How much RAM can I max it out to? Depends which version you have. There was a 4-slot version and there was an 8-slot version. If it's the 4-slot, you can go up to 4 gigs of DDR. And if it was the 8-slot, you can go up to 8 gigs of DDR. Do you have a Plex server? I do not. I do have a friend that has a Plex server, though, which he broadcasts over the internet. I should actually see if he'll add me on there. It's a pretty neat little service he has set up. I could set up a Plex server, though. I've got so much data for my father that I could set up a server and just leave it running 24/7 and never stop watching things until the day I die. He has a lot of stuff in this house. Well, guys, how long have we been going here? We have been going for 42 minutes. Not bad. Not bad for a stream where I was literally just testing to see if this Mac Mini could handle it. And we're still streaming at 1080p. I don't know how good the stream looks. Let's see. It's not too bad. It's a little blurry, but that's because the renderer I have set up is the quickest renderer and stuff like that. Can I use 32-bit apps like CS6 on Mojave? Yes, I use CS5 on Mojave. It works fine. It's Catalina where you got the problem. And Photoshop, CS5 and CS6 Photoshop is 64-bit and it still won't load in Catalina. I've tried. Although I hear the most recent version of CS6 that had the cloud update on it, Creative Cloud update, I hear that it actually does work, the Photoshop anyway. But what's wrong with the loading and stuff in Catalina? There's got to be a patch out there coming one day. Even though Photoshop 64-bit is 64-bit when it's running, when it launches, it's running through some kind of 32-bit launcher. Once the launcher kicks off, it's full 64-bit, but to get it to launch, you need 32-bit launcher. And it won't launch in Catalina because of that. It just identifies it as a 32-bit app, even though it's 100% 64-bit. So I've got to find Photoshop a new Photoshop if I go over to Catalina. So, yeah. I have a 5K iMac. Everything just moved on me. I don't know where it went. There it is. I have a iMac 5K and my SSD is dead. Is it the M.2 or the SATA SSD? I'm not sure on 5K iMacs. I think they changed them midway through the runs from SATA to M.2, but I'm not 100% sure on that. So I don't know what to say, but there is Wirelic. I hope I'm saying that right. Says there is M.2 adapters, so you can use regular M.2s on a lot of Macs. In fact, this Mini that we're talking on with a 5400 RPM hard drive, which is slow as heck, I'm converting it to a PC NVMe drive and 2 terabytes of storage. I'm going to probably use this as a, I don't know what yet, but it's going to be a lot faster for sure. They made the adapter. It works in High Sierra and later, and it's just instead of how Apple has it, which is a ribbon cable with an adapter, and then you plug their proprietary board in, and then you tape it down onto the hard drive bracket. It's strange. This is a whole tray which clips on and then tapes down on the hard drive bracket, I think. But it clips in, it's a solid board, and then you just clip in the NVMe drive, which is pretty neat. There's probably something similar for that for the 5K iMac. Fusion drive is both. Fusion drive uses SSD and hard drive, right? So if his SSD went out and he has a Fusion drive, it would be M.2. Let's see here. I'm trying to decipher what Jake's saying here. But yeah, in the trade for the Mac Pro, okay. In the trade for the Mac Pro, I got 2 Apple Cinema displays and a Power Mac G4 MDD. Neat, Jake. Any plans on patching the 1,1 to run the latest version of El Capitan? No. Although I've been begging Colin to do it. He was supposed to do it over the summer. I hear that you can still have the latest security update patch and it work, but you have to patch the kernel to have an older version of the kernel for it to boot, which I think still defeats the purpose of having the security patches. So the problem is with the kernel, apparently. It's not the patch itself. How did you become interested in Macs? I've explained this in multiple live streams, come to think of it. But I've explained this in multiple streams too. Yeah, the kernel panic. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, it will cause a kernel panic if you update it past that. But anyway, what got me into Macs, the first computer I ever used when I was a little kid, toddler, was a Macintosh Plus, which I still have sitting upstairs here at this house, which I broke. Long story. I've explained it many times. And then I grew up on PCs. I almost bought myself, I got a bunch of Christmas money one year. I almost bought a brand new iMac G3 from Circuit City right before I ended up with an HP XP desktop. It was a Pavilion. But I almost bought an iMac G3. I don't remember which. I think it was like a 600 megahertz or something. I was really young at the time. But I finally got to use an iMac G3 when I was in grade school. My school didn't have Macs, but we were at a museum and they had a huge room full of Macs that we played things on. I don't remember a whole very super great, but I do remember hating the puck mouse. And then I admired Macs from afar. I was strictly a PC guy. Made fun of the weird operating system and stuff to find out how smooth and nice it really is. Made fun of the fact you couldn't play games on them and all that stuff to later find out that the vintage Macs actually had really good games. Um, and basically, what got me back into it was I bought an iMac G4, which it was broken. It wasn't salvageable at the time, I thought, which now looking back it might have been. But the LCD was broken in it, and the hard drive was bad. I tore it down to make a lamp at school, and then the next year I bought another one because that first lamp kept electrocuting me, and it kept falling apart. And I had a school art project. I had to build something out of something and make a piece of furniture. And I decided to make the lamp again. I bought another iMac, and with all the parts I had saved between the two, I combined it into a headless iMac and started playing with it. And really started liking Leopard because I got a drive that had Leopard on it. And really started liking the feel of it and playing with it a lot. And then when I graduated college a few months later, I spent my graduation money on a early 2009 MacBook, and the rest was history. I decided I wanted the Mac Pro. I'd always wanted one because I was an Apple guy for everything but Mac. I had the iPhone, tons of iPods, all that stuff, but I was not into Mac yet. I did all that stuff on Windows, complaining on how slow it was. Big difference on a Mac with iTunes. But I always wanted the Mac Pro because I'd seen them in Apple Store and stuff, and I just always wanted one because I thought that would be, if I would get a Mac, that would be what I want. And I think it was the second Mac I ever bought, not counting the G4 iMac, which I still have too. It's sitting next door. But second modern Mac I bought was that Mac Pro, and that was it. I started my YouTube channel back up, doing videos on it, learning things as I went and showing you guys how to do it. And then the biggest thing that got me totally into Macs, completely into Macs without going back to PCs really, was I wanted to play my childhood games on a Mac because I always thought that was such a neat idea. And a lot of my childhood games could run on a Mac. And everything's going out of focus here. There we go. Could run on a Mac, but they were running on Classic. So I had to find a Classic supported Mac. And I ended up buying a G5 because I'm stupid. And back then didn't understand that G5s couldn't run OS 9. And then because I realized my G4 iMac, which should have been a dead giveaway, I realized my G4 iMac couldn't run OS 9. And so I bought the G5 thinking it could run OS 9. Of course, it couldn't. But it needed Classic, and it wouldn't work in Classic mode. So I decided to buy a 867 G4 Titanium. No, I bought a G4 Mini, thinking that would run OS 9, and at the time it couldn't. It now can, of course. So that didn't work. So I bought a 867 G4 Titanium, and I finally could run my childhood games. And by then I was hooked on collecting Macs. And that's how I became a Mac guy. Let's see here. Can you please ask Colin to patch High Sierra and Sierra or above to work on the 1, 1, 2, 1? That's not going to happen. Colin does not want to work on something like that. What it needs to work is probably more than what we think now because of the security update that broke that. It would have to be a lot of kernel hacking too, probably. But what the main thing it would need is SSE 4.1 support, which means they have to write an emulator for like 26 different instruction sets to make it work. That's going to slow down the computer a lot, and it's a lot of coding. So it's probably not going to happen, and Colin's definitely not going to do it. If someone would do it, it would probably be either Ethan Nelson Moore, Parrot Geek, or some rando guy. I can't do it. I don't know coding well enough to even try it. So it's probably never going to happen, sadly. I had the 1,1 and quickly learned about the kernel panic in the last version. Yeah, 2017-005 is the latest version you can run. I did a few videos about not updating it. And it was even featured on lowendmax.com's site with a big red notation on the top of it saying that Greg Rutke from Rutke Mods says not to update to 2018-001 or later. So, yeah, and I wasn't the guy that discovered it. I was just the guy that spread the news as quickly as possible. And I was still, I think, a day late to the party, really. And yet, most people, when they talk about it, mention me. Because I actually got the word out the quickest. So. What do you think of the Magic Trackpads and Magic Mice? I use the Magic Mouse, and it's amazing with gestures. I had the first Magic Mouse. In fact, I think I still have 2 or 3. My uncle gave me the other ones. I bought the first one. It had a Bluetooth problem, which was a very common problem, apparently. And it would disconnect constantly. It drove me crazy. And when I'd want a game with it, of course, there's no center click. You can't really scroll with it, and it just doesn't work with games. And it disconnected. The first one I had disconnected. I finally dropped some frames. But the first one I had just kept disconnecting. I could not get it to stay connected, and it really soured me on Magic Mice. I just didn't like the feel and the functionality. And it's neat to have the gestures and stuff. But oh my god, the Magic Trackpad. I love that thing, and I only had one. I still have it, but I ran over it about a year and a half or 2 years ago. And did you know those things would last? Because at the time I didn't. And the whole thing was shattered, cracked all the way across, big giant spider web on the top of it. Believe it or not, it still works, but now it's covered in packing tape, so it doesn't cut me. I need to get a new one. The thing is, I want the first gen and not the second gen because of the lightning charging and the fact that I want it to be able to run on older Macs because the newer one needs Bluetooth 4.1 or 4.0, I think. So I need the first version, which took batteries. I love the Magic Trackpad. It's a great, great thing. I need to get some more. Nice story about getting into Macs, and that's interesting about everything, Mr. Agents. That's neat that you're on your 2012 unibody. It's cool. I have the 1,1 Mac Pro. In the last El Capitan, it works with no problem. Yeah. And you can also run Windows 10, the latest version, on it, and still have a modern, updated operating system, which is nice. So far, I've only dropped 151 frames. I think that was in the last few minutes. And it stopped dropping frames again. It's not bad. This is still going pretty nicely. Where can I get a list of software that uses the PowerPC? There's not really a list because there's a lot of software. But if you go to Macintosh Garden, there's a lot of abandonware on there. All of that, mostly anyway, is PowerPC. Some of it is 68K, but a lot of it's PowerPC, and the 68K stuff still works usually in Classic too. So that's where you can go for that. Let's see here. Yeah, the wireless chiclet keyboard. I'm not a huge fan of those dysfunctional wombat. It's I can't get myself to like chiclet keyboards. The only time I like them is when they're on a MacBook. But using them as a desktop keyboard, they are crap in my opinion. And they're not repairable when they break. They're hard to clean, etc., etc. I'll stick to my old Apple keyboard, Apple wireless keyboard, or my Apple Pro keyboard. That's interesting. Matt says that the Magic Trackpad. Are you talking about the first trackpad or the second? Because the second, I swear, requires at least 4.0. I might be wrong on that, but the first one definitely didn't need it. But the second one, I'm pretty sure did. You're able to run your Magic Mouse 2 on it. I wonder how that's working. Maybe they did an update on it for older support. But they used to advertise that you needed at least El Capitan and a 4.0 Mac. Ever put a solid state in an iMac G4? Yes. Yes, I did. I put I think it's a 250 gig SSD from, I want to say Kingston, into the iMac G4, which is eventually going to be the world's fastest iMac G4 if Colin ever gets around to finishing it. But before I sent it off to him, I tested it, and I think I did a video on it. It was like part 2 of the world's fastest iMac G4 series. I showed how I installed it. It's complicated to fit a regular SATA SSD into it, but once you get it in there, it works fine. It works really nicely. It's interesting. The Magic Mouse 2 works on Jake's iMac. Well, maybe I'm wrong. I still don't really feel like plugging my mouse into the bottom, though. It's just such a weird design, Apple. I have a 1,1 Mac Pro in original state. Just bought a G4 Pro keyboard. Can I use it on my Mac Pro? Yes. I use them. Any USB keyboard Apple ever made will work, even into Catalina. Works totally fine. I prefer the older keyboards. The old ones with the rubber domes. They're nice. In fact, you can even use, if you have the USB adapter for ADB, you can use the older ADB keyboards with mechanical keys, like the extended keyboard. It will work still today in Catalina with no issues. So if you have one, try it out. You'll be very impressed. It will work totally fine. I'm only against Macintosh repository because Christian's a good friend of mine and they did him very wrong. But Macintosh repository does have some things that Christian just won't host because he's smart. If they go after Macintosh repository for the stuff they post, oh well, because they're not going to win that battle. Christian's smart. He only hosts what he thinks is safe to host. And if he gets something about getting it removed, he removes it immediately. Macintosh repository hosts a lot of things that they should not be hosting. But you can find a lot more things on there because of that. But it's in a very gray area when you get to that point. So, I don't like them, but sometimes you have to use them. That's all I'll say. It's impressive to hear that your magic mouse has been dropped that many times and it still works. Well, guys, I'm getting tired. I just wanted to do this quickly. I'm glad you guys joined in and chatted. There's 18 people still on here. We could keep going. But there's not a whole lot more to talk about. And where is the rest of the MacYak crew? They were on here. Let's see here. Okay. Sorry about this. Oh, I'm not leaving yet. You guys want to come in and chat on live stream ? I'm about to close it out otherwise. Was nice hanging out. Yeah, it was, Jake. I'm glad you joined in and with us. I don't think they're going to hop on. This thing's been streaming for an hour and 10 minutes. We've been going for an hour and 7.5 minutes. And 151 drop frames isn't bad for a 2014 Mini. I'm not complaining. What do you think of the new Mac Pro? It's really neat. And it is actually properly priced. I can't afford it, but I wish I could. Because I really want one. It would be the first T2 system I'd ever own. Unless I buy the 2018 Mini. But still. I like it. I like it a lot. So anyway. I think I'm going to call it. Thank you guys for joining today. I'm tired. I'm probably going to head to bed. But thank you for joining. It means a lot. And everything seemed to work great. Let's quickly show you this one more time if I can get it to... Eyesight. Okay. All right. So... we were streaming. It's not really focusing very well on this bright. Maybe if I move this. We dropped. It's kind of blurry, but you can get the idea. It's 151 frames there. That's the load on the CPU. It's only at 51% right now. It's working pretty nicely. Everything seems to be working great. I'm happy. You know, this worked out very nicely. So we're going to close out this camera. Yes. Thank you for the super chat, John. Just wanted to say your channel is awesome and your videos helped a lot with my new 3,1. I'm very glad they helped you out, and thank you so much, man. It means a lot. So, yeah, I'm glad I didn't end it just then. But anyway, guys, I'm going to call it. Thank you guys for joining tonight and this impromptu testing of this Mac Mini here. It's working. I might use this as my future streaming box. It's not too bad. Um, so we'll see. But anyway, guys, thank you guys for watching today, and this has been a RedK Mods video.